Hey C3 as Miami. My name is Joshua. I go to North Miami Senior High School and I'm a senior this year.
My name is Anastasia. I attend Miami Northern Senior High School and I'm a senior this year. Hey Joshua, how about you open up with a prayer?
Alright, I would love to. Everybody please bow your heads and close your eyes. Father God, we thank you for this precious day that you have given us. So we could all be together as one and just worship and praise you, God. Lord, thank you for actually waking us up this morning as we speak and continue to wake us up each morning. Lord, we thank you, and we thank you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. How about you guys enjoy our worship now?
Somebody give God praise today. Come on, let me hear you, Eugene.
Hallelujah.
Let's get it. Oh, y'all say it. Come on. Y'all sound good. Everybody lift it up, see. Hey. Everybody sing it out, see. Come on, go.
Thank you, Lord. Yeah. Forever grateful for you, oh Lord. Would you worship? Whoa, yeah. Thank you. The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. The God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. No, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. Yeah. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Won't you touch and agree that the victory belongs to you, Lord? Yeah.
Turn it for good.
the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Really stop. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see. I'm gonna see your victory. Whoever abide in the shadow, whoever abide in the name of Jesus. See, I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. Oh, for the battle belongs to you, Lord. To you, Lord. To you, Lord. Hey. To you, Lord. To you, Lord.
Hey, my name is Brian, and I attend Miami North Senior High School, and I am a senior. And I'm here to talk about giving. God has blessed you and your family in so many ways, and I am asking you to give your very best, and here are the ways to give.
Let me start by asking you a question. What comes to mind when you hear the phrase, free people? Okay, maybe it's a patriotic flag or a clothing brand. Let's try that again. What comes to mind when you hear someone has become a free person? Is it someone who got out of jail, like now they're free to join the rest of the population, or someone who got their driver's license and now they're free to drive themselves, or someone who graduated high school and now they're free from 8 hours a day at school and annoying homework? Or is it someone who turned 18 or even 21 and now they're free to be considered an adult and make their own decisions? Those are all really different scenarios, but they have one thing in common: freedom. Freedom is one of the best and hardest things about high school. And here's what I mean. In high school, you are probably freer than you've ever been. Like, you don't have to stay in the same classroom all day. You don't have someone telling you where to eat lunch. Chances are your parents are letting you go more places and do more stuff without them than they ever have before. But at the same time, freedom is one of the hardest things, because even though we have more than we've ever had, we still don't have all the freedom that we want. Like, if you're in high school, chances are you want to be able to make your own decisions, or you want to be able to live outside of the restrictions of the authority figures around you, or you want to be able to go on a road trip with your friends and not have to run it by anybody. For you, freedom is a break from the rules. is saying goodbye to your school's rules and your parent and your step-parents' rules and your teacher's rules. Freedom means making your own rules. Like, no more curfew because you're too young to stay out too late. No more get a parent's signature because you're too young to give yourself permission. No more text me where you are when you get there because you're too young to be anywhere without your mom knowing your location at all times. I mean, come on. And in that way, getting older leads to more freedom because you don't have to live with all those kinds of rules. In other words, freedom is basically the opposite of having something or someone control you. And that sounds good to just about everybody. And that's why some people have a hard time with the idea of God or church or the Bible. Because understandably, when it comes to freedom from control, a lot of people feel the opposite of freedom at church. And maybe you felt that way. I mean, let's face it. Many of us think Christianity is all about rules. You may not have grown up in the church, but I did. And my understanding of Christianity started with the 10 Commandments. It was a whole bunch of thou shalt nots, and my parents did everything they could to make sure I was a rule follower, right? And over time, this began to shape my view of God. I saw him as a God who was all about what I did and didn't do, kind of like a scorekeeper in a basketball game. And maybe you can relate. Maybe you've always seen God as a rules person too. And like everyone from the church to the preachers to the Bible kind of seem to back that up. And for some of you, your parents back that up. Like, thou shalt not drink alcohol, or thou shalt not have sex, thou shalt not cheat on any school assignment, thou shalt not say a curse word unless you only say the first letter or whisper them. Thou shalt pray and read the Bible. Thou shalt go to church and invite your friends. Thou shalt talk about God in small group and at school. And the problem is that these things feel like rules. And for people like you who desperately want freedom, rules feel like control. They feel like curfew. They feel like dress codes. They feel like do your homework and eat your veggies. Bottom line, none of us like rules. We don't like being told what to do. We don't like being told what not to do. And even if you're not tempted to drink alcohol or you don't need to cheat on a test, sometimes it's just annoying to be told that you can't. And I bet some of you would say that rules seem to set you up for failure because you've tried to follow the rules before, but ultimately failed. Like maybe you went to a church service, a camp, or a retreat, and you made a decision, okay? I'm gonna get my act together in this particular area, and you tried, like you gave it all that you got. And you held strong for some weeks, or maybe even some months. And then one night, or one weekend, you stumbled again. And you felt like a total failure because you didn't follow the rules. I'd go one step further to say that some of you love a lot of things about God, church, and the Bible. It's just the rules that make you feel like you have to live a boring, like locked down life with no excitement. I mean, doesn't every other area of your life have rules? Like rules at home, rules at school, rules at work. And so when you come to church and you hear about more rules, it's like, oh man, like this is so awesome. I can't wait to hear about more things that I should or shouldn't do. But here's a question that has always bothered me. If God made us, and freedom is something that we all want, doesn't that mean that God put that desire inside of us? I mean, doesn't that mean that God literally wired us for freedom? And if so, why do we feel the opposite of freedom at church? Like, which is it? And that's exactly the tension that we're gonna talk honestly about throughout this whole series. And we're gonna kick things off by looking at a book of the Bible called Galatians. It's actually a letter written by Paul, who was a leader in the early church. If you've never heard of Paul, here's the short version. He was a Christian-killing Jewish leader, and then one day he meets Jesus. But not like you meet somebody at a coffee shop. Paul met Jesus after Jesus had died and risen from the dead. So that kind of changed Paul's mind about a lot of stuff, and he became a Christian and a church leader. Back in the day, as a church leader, you couldn't just DM, other church people and start a group text. You had to write actual physical letters. So that's what Paul was doing, and that's why he begins his letter this way. Paul, an apostle, sent not from men nor by a man, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father, who raised him from the dead, and all the brothers and sisters with me to the churches in Galatia. That last part is because Paul wrote this particular letter to a group of people in the city of Galatia. The Galatians were dealing with a lot of tension, and one of those tensions was this wrestling match between following the rules and giving people grace and forgiveness when they didn't follow the rules. And you see, since Jesus was born into an ancient Jewish culture, some of these people had grown up hearing about the law, which was basically God's set of rules for the people that he cared about. And this law was given to the Jewish people. But then they learned about grace, which meant they could still have a relationship with God based on what Jesus did for them when he died on the cross and resurrected. Grace allowed people to be connected to God despite failing at the whole rule following thing. So basically, people were confused. They were like, okay, what now? Like, what do we do? What do we not do? Is this about the law and the rules, or is this about grace? Like, which is it? And just to give you some context, the law had some weird things in it, right? Not because God was trying to be strange, but because culture was just different back then. And remember, this was ancient times, and people had multiple wives, and they could sell their kids into slavery, and weird stuff like that. That's the kind of culture they were dealing with. So if someone back then heard rules about how to cut their hair, what clothes to wear, and how to prepare their food, they weren't things that were designed to be weird for weirdness' sake. They were things that, in the cultural context of the time, were best for the people based on God's love for them. And right up there in the category of weird religious things came a topic called circumcision. Now, circumcision was a thing that, yeah, I'll just go ahead and say it. It was no fun for a guy, okay? Most of you probably already know what circumcision is, but if you don't, ask your small group leader later, okay? Circumcision normally happens when a baby is born, but the conversation that we are going to hear about it today was in regards to adult men. Strange? Yes. And to think about it in terms of a religious act in an ancient world that represented someone's devotion to God, that seems straight crazy, okay? But people were asking, do the guys have to take this particular step of circumcision in order to be okay with God? That was the question. Some people thought the answer to this should be a simple yes, they should. It's part of the law. God commands it, so people should obey it, and they should obey God. Other people, and I'm imagining the uncircumcised dudes were leading the way in this, were like, is that really necessary? Like, really? What about the whole grace thing? We're talking about surgery here, people. And it was the cause of some pretty serious conflict. So now we understand why Paul had to talk about it. In chapter 5 of his letter to the Galatians, Paul writes something very interesting. Check it out. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Now, I imagine people were wondering, why don't you just say that we are set free? Like, why do you say that it is for freedom we have been set free? It's kind of confusing, right? Well, remember, Paul was writing to a group of people who believed that keeping the law was what would make them right with God. And they believed that real God followers did certain things, and circumcision was one of them. With that in mind, Paul basically says, guys, Jesus did what he did so that you could live as free people. So don't act like you're not free. You are. And freedom means that you don't have to do anything to be in with God. It was now all about what Jesus did, and no longer about how we followed the rules and the laws. And many of these people couldn't imagine a life where they could walk with God in confidence and peace, regardless of their behavior, and whether or not it matched up with everything they were supposed to do. Like, they couldn't even imagine it. Now, notice that Paul didn't say, it is for church attendance, you have been set free. It is for good behavior that you have been set free. It's for perfection that you have been set free. It's for losing your individuality that you have been set free. It's for boredom that you've been set free. Nope. It says for freedom. You were set free to be free. You were set free to live as free people. When you have a relationship that's based on grace, you are free to relax. I mean, yes, we're gonna have good days and bad days. Yeah, we'll have days when we follow the rules and days when we're off track. But we should always know with confidence that God loves us and wants to be close to us. We were made to walk in freedom. Jesus wants us to be free people. Now, does this mean that we should immediately just ignore all the rules God has set for us? No. Chances are you don't even want to. You know that rules like don't lie and don't steal are generally good for you. And in the coming weeks, we'll talk about the rest of them. But for now, let's focus on what we know for sure. Jesus wants us to be free people. And for some of us, that is a big change. So for some of you, this comes down to your view of walking with God. Some of you have spent your whole life living like being close to God equals following the rules, or not following the rules equals not being close to God. And it feels like your relationship with God is always on the line when you mess up, which means when you don't keep the rules, you count yourself out. You don't show up at church. You don't talk in small group. But you gotta remember, it's for freedom that you've been set free. And that means that you are free to be here even when you mess up. You are free to pray even when you fail. You are free to participate in worship even when you feel like you don't deserve it. You are free to be close to God even when you're not being good. You're free to call yourself a Jesus follower even when you haven't acted like a Jesus follower should. That's what freedom looks like. Think about it this way. We all know people that we feel like we have to walk on eggshells around, right? Like we can't say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or they'll get mad. They keep us on edge. But the opposite is true too. We also all know people who will love us no matter what, don't we? We all know people we can be our real selves around, even our worst selves around, and they're gonna love us anyway. And what do you do around those people? You relax. And Paul is basically saying, hey, it's the same with God. We can relax in our relationship with God. We have nothing to prove. It's already been proven. Jesus did everything that needs to be done for us to be good with God. Do our decisions and choices matter? Yeah, of course they do. When you have kids one day, you'll care about their decisions and behavior, but simply because you want what's best for them. And that's what God wants for us. We'll talk about this later in this series, but for now, if you're a follower of Jesus, relax. There's nothing to prove. The work is done. Enjoy your relationship with Him because that's what free people do, and Jesus wants us to be free people.